The introduction. In the small town of Maplewood, a chilling quiet enveloped the early morning air, punctuated only by the rustling of leaves underfoot. The streets, usually bustling with the murmurs of early risers, were muted as though the world was holding its breath. The kind of day when the overcast sky seemed to lower, heavy with an unshakable tension, casting a pall over the neighborhood. Dwellings, with their neatly trimmed hedges and front porches adorned with blooming flowers, bore an unnatural stillness. It was a facade, a thin veneer of normalcy that would soon be shattered. At the center of Maplewood stood the old timber house at the end of Elm Street. Its paint had begun to peel, a victim of years gone by, and its creaky steps whispered stories of the past. Today, however, it was the epicenter of a mystery yet to unfold. Within its walls, a mother had vanished, leaving behind only echoes of her laughter and the half-finished chores that now lay neglected. Neighbors peered through their curtains, speculations swirling like storm clouds. What could have prompted her sudden disappearance? Was it a case of abandonment or something more sinister? As police sirens echoed through the stillness, questions mounted. The search for answers would peel back the layers of Maplewood's quaint exterior, revealing secrets better left buried. Little did they know, the truth lurking in the shadows was far darker than any of them could imagine. The victim. Sarah Mitchell was a beloved figure in Maplewood. At 33, she embodied the spirit of the closely knit community, known for her infectious smile and boundless energy. As a single mother, she juggled the demands of work with raising her spirited son, Jamie, who brought joy and laughter into her life. Sarah was the kind of person who would bring fresh-baked goods to the local bake sale or volunteer her weekends for neighborhood cleanup events. Her sudden disappearance was not just alarming. It felt like the sun had been eclipsed in their small town. As the investigation commenced, authorities began to piece together the fragments of Sarah's life. Friends described her as a fiercely protective mother, often seen at local parks, sharing playful moments with Jamie. Yet, as officers interviewed those closest to her, an unsettling picture emerged. Beneath the polished surface, there were whispers of trouble's distant relations with her own family, the pressures of being a single parent, and an unsettling sense of isolation. Neighbors occasionally heard her arguing with someone late at night, but full details remained murky. In the days that followed her disappearance, the search intensified. Volunteers scoured the wooded areas surrounding Maplewood, brandishing flyers emblazoned with Sarah's smiling face. A double-edged sword of fear and hope sliced through the community. Did she willingly walk away from her life, or was something far more sinister afoot? The stakes were high, and time was running out. The crime scene. The sun sank lower in the sky, swallowed by a creeping fog as the police cordoned off Sarah Mitchell's home. A tension filled the air, heavier than the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves from the surrounding forest. Officers donned gloves, carefully mapping out the living room, where traces of a rushed departure lingered. Toys were strewn haphazardly across the floor, a stark contrast to the meticulously kept interior. A half-filled coffee cup sat on the table, still warm to the touch, a chilling reminder of her abrupt absence. Detective Kelley, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for detail, paced through the house. He disregarded the home's warmth and charm, honing in on the scene's stark reality. On the kitchen counter, A list of groceries lay untouched next to a notebook, hinting at her daily routines. The detective squinted at the handwritten notes, realizing they were more than mere reminders. They hinted at her mental state, crossed out items, and frantic scribbles spoke volumes amid her mundane tasks. Had Sarah been overwhelmed? As the investigation continued, the corners of the living room revealed more unsettling details. A broken vase lay beneath a coffee table, shards glinting like teeth in the dim light. It was unclear if the damage was an accident or a prelude to something more disturbing. Each artifact of domesticity painted a portrait of vulnerability and confusion. Yet no definitive answers emerged. What fate had befallen Sarah? The answers were buried in the folds of Maplewood's quiet facade, waiting to be unearthed. The early investigation. The investigation kicked into high gear as uniformed officers canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing residents who might have seen or heard anything unusual on that fateful day. As the sun rose, illuminating the muted details of Maplewood, a sense of urgency permeated the air. Detective Kelley led the charge, gathering snippets of information that could pivot the inquiry. The chatter of concerned neighbors wafted through the crisp morning air, each voice laced with anxiety. One resident, an elderly woman named Mrs. Klein, recounted hearing raised voices the night before Sarah's disappearance. Her brittle hands trembled as she recalled the sounds echoing through the stillness. A man and a woman arguing, she claimed, her gray eyes wide with intensity. The detective jotted down notes, curious about the man's identity. Other neighbors reported seeing a dark sedan parked outside Sarah's house multiple times over the last week, but no one could confirm who was behind the wheel. As the hours progressed, the tension was palpable. The town's concern morphed into speculation, with fingers of suspicion extending not just to strangers, but to those within their own community. Detective Kelley emphasized to his team the importance of not overlooking anyone, even those who knew Sarah best. The initial interviews raised eyebrows, revealing that people hid their secrets just behind friendly smiles. The facade of Maplewood's innocence began to wear thin. Answers were lurking, but they were caught in the web of everyday lives. The dead ends. Days turned into a week, and as the investigation unfolded, the search for Sarah Mitchell grew increasingly tangled with frustration. Detective Kelley reviewed the collected statements, each promising lead dwindling into a series of dead ends. The dark sedan. No one had managed to trace its owner, the license plates too faint in the minds of the witnesses. Mrs. Klein's account of the argument, it led only to a handful of names, none of whom could provide any relevant insight. The field of possible suspects seemed to stretch endlessly, each theory collapsing under the weight of inaction. The atmosphere in the office was thick with tension. Detectives shuffled through papers, the overhead lights buzzing with a relentless hum. As the team dissected the compiled data, they began to notice a pattern. Each resident interviewed pushed aside any notion of having seen something suspicious, their standard answers often accompanied by a nervous glance. It was then that Kelley realized there was a deeper layer to the community's reticence. Perhaps a collective fear or a communal bond so tight that it suffocated honesty. Even the digital footprint that investigators managed to track yielded scant results. Sarah's social media accounts offered no newfound clues. Her posts were upbeat and seemingly innocuous, a stark contrast to the spiraling situation. Unanswered texts from friends spoke of neglect and isolation, echoing eerily through the silence left by her absence. Kelley felt the weight of time pressing down, the urgency growing sharper with each passing day. The community's goodwill was turning toward impatience, sympathy waning as doubt began to bloom. A break in the case. As weeks ticked by with no sign of Sarah Mitchell, hope began to dwindle. But on the 10th day, a breakthrough shattered the stagnation that had gripped the investigation. During a routine search of the area surrounding Sarah's home, a young volunteer stumbled upon something alarming: a discarded handbag partially buried in the underbrush just off a secluded trail. The bag was worn, its fabric frayed at the edges, yet some contents remained intact, providing fragments that hinted at a story long left untold. When detectives arrived at the scene, Kelley felt a rush of anticipation mixed with trepidation. Inside the handbag were items that bore Sarah's name: her ID, a few crumpled receipts, and an unused ticket for an upcoming local concert. The detective couldn't help but notice the contrast between the mundane nature of the items and the chilling circumstance surrounding their discovery. More importantly, however, was the receipt for a store that specialized in wigs and beauty supplies purchased shortly before her disappearance. It suggested a troubling shift in Sarah's world, perhaps illustrating a change in appearance or identity. Experts were called in to analyze the handbag's location. They inspected the surrounding area for forensic evidence. Search teams resumed combing the woods, their diligence fueled by renewed determination. Things felt alive again, pulsing with possibilities. The community rallied, inspired by the sudden spark of hope, as signs went up urging any potential witnesses to come forward with information. Detective Kelley felt the tide turning. This time the investigation would not stall. They were once again grasping for the truth hiding beneath layers of silence. The suspect, the discovery of Sarah's handbag, had opened a floodgate of leads. But one stood out, a name that emerged from the shadows and sent chills through the investigation: Mark Lawson, an acquaintance of Sarah's from college. The name had surfaced during follow-up conversations with Sarah's circle of friends. They described Mark as charming but prone to moments of instability, particularly when relationships soured. It was said that he had been in town shortly before Sarah vanished, and his erratic behavior had raised eyebrows among those who knew him. Detective Kelley and his team poured through Mark's background, uncovering a series of failed relationships, police reports involving petty crimes, and a history of job instability. Yet it was his connection to Sarah that was most troubling after all. They were once close friends. Months before her disappearance, there were whispers that he had tried to rekindle that connection, suggesting an increasing obsession that had spiraled out of control. As Kelley dug deeper, they learned that Mark had been seen near Sarah's home in the days leading up to her disappearance, often lurking on the fringes during events and community functions. Witnesses described him as being overly attentive to Sarah, a shadow trailing behind her. Initially dismissed as harmless, those accounts now carried the undertone of menace, painting a picture of a man who struggled to accept being kept at arm's length. With a mounting case against him, Kelley secured a warrant to apprehend Mark for questioning. The detective knew that this was a pivotal moment in the investigation. If Mark was as connected to Sarah's disappearance as the evidence suggested, perhaps the dark veil shrouding Maplewood's tranquility was about to be lifted. The trial. After weeks of mounting pressure and meticulously gathering evidence, the case against Mark Lawson culminated in a tense courtroom drama that gripped the town of Maplewood. The small courthouse buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with palpable tension as reporters jostled for position and townsfolk filled the seats, eager for answers. The proceedings commenced under the watchful eyes of a judge whose authority filled the room like a cloak, the gravity of the situation looming heavily over everyone present. Prosecutors laid out their timeline meticulously, outlining key connections between Mark and Sarah leading up to her disappearance. They highlighted his alarming behaviors, his proximity to her home, and his eventual admission of seeing her shortly before she vanished. Each witness brought forth painted a complex portrait of a man unhinged by rejection. The dissection of Mark's psyche unfolded like a dark tapestry, with threads of obsession woven through the fabric of friendship, transformed into something sinister. Mark's defense team countered with their own narrative, portraying him as a misunderstood figure, a troubled man who had merely been in the wrong place at the wrong time. They argued that his past did not define his present, citing a lack of concrete evidence tying him directly to Sarah's disappearance. The courtroom was rife with conflicting emotions: shock, sympathy, disbelief. As testimonies for both sides played out, Sarah's absence echoed through the air, a heavy reminder of the woman who had vanished too soon. As the trial progressed, the resolution that the community awaited felt ever elusive. Closing arguments delivered on both sides heightened the tension in the room. And when the jury finally retreated to deliberate, time seemed to stretch infinitely. Hearts raced and breaths held as Maplewood stood, hoping justice for Sarah would prevail. The aftermath. The gavel echoed through the courtroom, and with that single striking sound, the fate of Mark Lawson was sealed. As the jury delivered their verdict, guilty, the room erupted into a chorus of gasps and whispers, relief intertwined with sorrow. The battle for justice had been won, but the loss of Sarah Mitchell resonated as a haunting void. Families hugged one another, tears streaking the faces of friends who had long awaited closure. Yet for those close to Sarah, no verdict could bring her back. In the weeks following the trial, Maplewood struggled to heal. The trial had peeled back layers of perception, exposing insecurities and hidden fears that lay beneath the community's surface. Streets once lined with charming houses now felt hollow, as if the laughter that once filled their air had been siphoned away. Sarah's absence lingered like a ghost, her vibrant spirit still haunting the corridors of the lives she touched. Detective Kelley continued to check in on Sarah's family, offering support as they navigated the painful aftermath. Community gatherings became forums of remembrance, where locals honored her life with candlelight vigils and testimonials that spoke of her kindness and resilience. Despite the grief, a sense of purpose emerged, igniting conversations about mental health resources and preventive measures for domestic violence. The town had awakened to the reality that darkness can fester even in the brightest places. As reminders of loss lingered, there was also an undercurrent of renewed resolve. Maplewood would not become shackled by fear. It would transform sorrow into strength. Seeds of hope were sown in the community with a united goal: to ensure that Sarah's story would inspire change not just in Maplewood, but beyond, as they wove her memory into the fabric of their lives. Reflection. As time flowed onward, the shadow of Sarah Mitchell's life intertwined with the very essence of Maplewood. In coffee shops and by the schoolyard, whispers of her bravery and the circumstances that had changed her world persisted. Detective Kelley navigated the now familiar streets with a heavy heart, unease a constant companion. as he contemplated the facets of injustice. Investigating the case had become more than a task. It morphed into an ethos, a commitment to safeguard the community from similar tragedies. It was during a reflective evening that Kelley stood at the edge of the very wooded path where Sarah's handbag had been found. He inhaled the crisp air, pondering the evolving narrative of human experience, how laughter and pain could coexist in silent confrontation. The whispers of his neighbors echoed in his mind. Their fear had woven itself into the fabric of the town, and healing felt inevitable yet elusive. In time, Maplewood transformed its grief into awareness. Community meetings began bridging gaps, discussing issues of mental health, safety, and support systems for those caught in cycles of trauma. Children were taught the values of compassion and vigilance, a legacy emerging from the darkened tale of Sarah Mitchell. While life moved on, her impact became a catalyst for healing, an enduring reminder that even in darkness, the light of community can prevail.